Hey guys, I'm Rick, and that is One Big Pile of Bricks with our amazing guest, Tim.
Hello.
Hey Tim, how you doing?
Yeah, doing all right.
Now, Tim, for everyone who's listening to this, is from Lego Masters Season 2, right?
Yes, that is correct.
2020 was when it aired.
Wow, that's a long time ago.
It's a
It feels,
throwback.
it feels like
It feels like a long time ago.
Yes.
Especially with everything that's happened in the last couple of years, it feels like a long time ago.
Well, most people have just crossed off the last 2 years, so we'll just pretend it's 2020 now.
That's
Season
right.
3,
Does that
season
mean
4,
your
another
fame
thing.
is back and you can start doing meet and greets?
I don't think it was really there to begin with, to be honest. No. Like from our experience on the show, admittedly, Danny and I are probably the lesser popular contestants from it. Just because
Not necessarily.
Surely.
Like, you got to look at it as an overall thing, right? In the Lego community, you're always going to be popular because you're on a show, right?
That's
so you're not
true.
looking at it as, and this is, I think, the problem, or not the problem, I think the issue some of the other contestants can't wrap their head around that. In the Lego community, you're like Lego famous. But in the grand scheme of things, there's so much going on in the world that outside of Lego,
That's right.
it's whatever, right? But you're on a Lego show, you're one of the many few that have been selected in the last few seasons to go on the show. Not many people have the privilege to be selected.
That's right.
That's true.
And
yeah.
you came fourth.
That's true. Yeah, kind of forget that actually.
Yeah.
It feels like a lifetime ago. But
And because all the filming happened before really COVID kind of kicked off, you didn't have to worry about wearing masks back then, did you?
no,
Well,
like it wasn't even on the radar really, because we filmed from late October through till almost, I think it was about middle of December. Then there was a 2-week break for Christmas, and then we came back for 2 weeks in January, which was like, okay, cool. Here's the semi-final challenge, and then like, you know, 5 days later, here's the finale. So
yes,
We were at the finale, Caroline.
we were. That's
We
right.
did. We didn't vote for the winners, but that's fine.
neither did we. Neither did we.
You never know which way it's going to go.
Yeah. Like when Danny and I, when we were there voting for the finale, both of us were like split on who our first choice was, because I'm like, I really love the mech robots. Danny's like, I really love Alex and Jackson's thing. We're like, okay, what's your second choice? And both of us went pirate ship. We're like, that one.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Well, at least you revealed it. I didn't know if you were going to reveal. I didn't want some sort of drama in the Lego community.
No,
going,
look,
"Oh,
I've
they're
got mad respect for all the people that became finalists in our season, and there were good things across the board for all of it. It was like a sliver of a hairline difference between all of them. We just, you know, we're literally arguing with each other, going like, I really like this, I really like this. It's like, okay, but it's about who we like together. And that's where the argument was, like, we both have different tastes. All right, well, what's our second choice? Well, we both were impressed by the pirate ship when we walked in.
It was massive. I don't think.
was, yeah.
I don't think the
Huge.
camera shows how actually big that thing was.
I mean, if you go back and watch the finale episode, I was the first person through the door. I was very proud to have that moment. But first person through the door, and I walked through, and like, you could almost see me like mouth swearing, being like, "Oh my god, that is huge!" Like,
I reckon
Yes.
they would have won if it had more items on it, right? Because it felt a bit bare. When we saw it, I was like, this thing's going to fall over because of how tall it was, right? Because it was half a ship, you know?
Well, you're going for the scale of the thing, right?
Well, you
So it
want
picks it
scale,
up on
and it's
camera.
wow. And that's why Jackson and Alex, we didn't vote for Jackson and Alex, you know? Like,
Sorry, guys.
sorry, guys. Like, Damien Andrews, we were like, oh, wow, that's impressive, right? Because we're like, oh, this is like a throwback to Henry and Cade having mechs. You were like,
Yeah.
oh, this is awesome. But I don't think the camera showed how in-depth the other ones were.
I mean, another thing as well is like the camera doesn't show how complicated the finale build is. Like,
Yeah.
we were
Yeah.
there. That baseboard is huge. Like, Danny and I had our own concept, which we're still going to kind of keep secret because we want to do something
That's
with
fair.
it. But when we walked in, we're like, oh, we had our concept. Our concept would be tiny compared to how big this baseboard was. It was like bigger than this table here in front of us. It was huge.
Wow.
And so, credit to Trent and Josh for smashing out a pirate ship that big, because that
It was massive. It was tall as it was like 12 meters. It was huge. Like, I don't think you can grasp the scale of how big it was because when we walked in, we were like, oh my beep. Like, you know, it's like, you know, you're like, oh wow, look how massive this thing is.
Yeah.
And, you know, there has to be a second and a third, unfortunately, and that's the way of the game. But, you know, either of those could have won.
Yeah.
That's right.
Like that's the thing. Like the mech arena as well. They did really good at pulling focus to the middle, and then they did that big grand stadium around the edge. Alex and Jackson, when I looked at theirs, I'm like, oh my god, how much time went into building just the mountainside, because you get the height from it as
And
well.
all those little, like, things they hide, because you know how Brickman's always like, oh, you got to make sure you put other things in there. You know how he's like, oh, you got to make these little things. And all that time they would have spent on all that rock work.
Yeah.
Because that's investment. And people don't realise that they're quick to judge to say, hey, you know, when Darway and Amy were building, why are they messing around with the outside so much? But they don't realise that makes as much of the build as the biggest thing you're building, right?
Yeah, it's like with our build that we did for the above and below challenge, which was the dinosaurs, which is kind of relevant to this room, but we had the above and below, so it was the build that was on top of the table, build that was below it as well, and we did pretty much the new world. We had the crane with a string going straight through the top of the table coming out the bottom, and Brickman said like he enjoyed walking up to it and you could immediately tell there's two different worlds from just a general overlook, but then there were the tiny details looking into it. There was little tiny triceratops on the bottom part of it. On the top section, it didn't make it to air, but we had this like little black van on the side, and we had these two minifigures with black shades and black suits on. He's like, I love that. They're the Hush people. That's like, this is disappearing. And so we got a lot of praise from Brickman for those sorts of tiny little details, but a lot of it, you don't see it on air because you have to be there in the room to really appreciate it.
Yeah.
The editing team, I'm not a big fan of the editing team of Lego Masters because, you know...
It's a hard job, to be fair. There's
it is.
so much content.
I think we're going to get a reveal soon of who wins Season 4 because as soon as they release those trailers, you're like, oh, that's the winner. Like, every year, it's like they don't learn from previous years.
But in terms of editing, they've got X amount of time that they have to fill, you know, and it comes down to seconds. It's jam-packed, and they've really got to... They can't sit and pick and choose. They really have to pick and choose, don't they? They can't show the whole thing.
Yeah, like it's one of the things that in retrospect, when watching back on the show, like you can watch it on TV and you're like, oh, they missed this. Oh, they didn't do this. I didn't do this. And then after the whole season's finished, you're like, there is so much actually that was there already. Like there's so much content that gets cut. There's so many like little tiny arguments that get cut because, you know, sometimes it's a small problem, but when there's a big
argument... So did you and Danny nearly have a divorce over Lego Masters?
Star Wars, man. Star Wars. All right. I am not good with explaining things at all. So imagine somebody who hasn't watched Star Wars since high school, which was very much the case.
I'm not angry. I'm disappointed, Danny.
So I had the concept for a Star Wars vehicle, and by the end of the episode, we had actually scrapped half the entire back end of the build. Star Wars was our worst episode. We actually had a huge fight on there, and then there's this good level of like aftercare that comes from the show where they've got like all these people that ask you questions. Is there any episodes that you're concerned about? And we're like, Star Wars 100%. And the way they edited us in that episode, fantastic. I literally sent them an email. I'm like, I owe everybody a very expensive round of drinks because we had a full like diva moment meltdown. It was, well, I had a diva moment. So, setting being, I've drawn something in front of me as a Star Wars ship, and Danny can't understand that, you know, this triangle shape here is actually bent, curved inwards. It's got all these other sort of things because I can't draw 3D at all, and I can't even explain it to you at the moment. We had these engines going off the back, and then I was like, okay, how do we best utilize this? I'll give Danny something that she's really good at. She's good at using a creative space and making a small story. Make the cockpit. I start making the parts on the side of the ship. I look over to Danny, and Danny's got this cockpit about yay big. And I'm like, I'm not telling her to destroy that because she's put a lot of effort into that for something that she's clearly uncomfortable for, and then it gets very micromanagey. We'll just roll with it.
That's right.
And so the scale blew up massively. That's right. And then
hashtag Kale scale.
And so then the back of the ship, we had a plan for it. As soon as we got in, I started having some technical issues with the sheer size of it, being able to attach the sides onto it. There was this whole engine on the back that we completely got rid of. There was these like bomb turrets that were going on the side that I had to completely scrap because of a time factor, trying to then help bring it all together. Because what would happen is once the cockpit was done, Danny was stuck. She goes, what do I do? I'm like, well, try and recreate this. I don't know how to make this really odd shape. And so it got really stressful, and because everything was going on, we felt there was a lot more cameras near us, and I literally got so stressed out. I'm just like, get the cameras away from me, just out of my face. And somebody came over and like, you're all right? And I'm like, I need to get my bearings back. I'm very stressed, and I feel like there's a camera on me at every point. And I think it was about like, they went away for like 5 minutes, and that was enough. But like, I felt like for 30 minutes, you got the camera on top, camera on the corner of the desk, and there was like 3 camera people either side. I swear they would have got the juiciest footage of us fighting, but I have so much respect for them post-editing that they hit all that because, oh my God, it was bad. It was not bad on Danny's fault. It's just, you know, when the Marvel Challenge happened in season 3, right? I think, was it Fleur or was it Sarah who didn't know what the...
I want to say it was...
You can answer this one because I don't want to get in trouble.
But either way,
anyway, maybe
point
we won't go out on that
there's
list.
always going to be one person in the room that you, with any of that sort of challenge that you risk, who has absolutely no idea about
Yes.
what the context is. So with Star Wars, like I was excited to do Empire, and then as soon as the challenge started and Danny's like, I've completely forgotten everything about Star Wars. I'm like, cool, your strength is whimsy and color and using parts interesting. We've just got the blandest faction in the entire galaxy who have no color whatsoever. So she was completely out of her field.
Well, that's what Rick and I were watching that episode, and we were having the same discussion. We said for someone who doesn't have that pre-existing knowledge of Star Wars, just like, well, you know, later on we were talking about the Marvel episode, of course, but if you don't have that pre-existing knowledge, you could be the best builder in the world, but you're not going to actually have an idea of what you're supposed to be building.
And it came back to bite us a little bit too, because in the semi-finals, right, Trent and Josh got to pick who got what, and they gave us industrial, and I'm like,
yes,
damn it.
Of course they did. They're like, quick way to elimination.
It might not have been a target at us, but it was like, you know, they were focusing on trying to give Damien and Andrew like the park and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but like,
that's
it was
fair.
such a good play, and I'm like, I love you guys and I hate you so much right now.
I think the biggest thing with like anything, because pop culture is we're such a consumer heavy market now compared to 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Marvel's in your face, Star Wars is in your face. You kind of forget that
back
some
then it
people
wasn't.
don't actually watch it.
No.
Because it's around you all the time. So you sort of go, oh, and then when you find out people don't watch it, you go, oh, but it makes sense with poor Danny, because back then they had the whole, this is boys films, this is girls films, right? It's a bit different now where it's aimed at everybody.
Yeah.
And it makes it hard when you're trying to build a spaceship if you don't remember Star Wars. Like,
The funny thing is as well is that episode 3 was on TV about 2 nights before they announced the challenge, and I asked if Danny wanted to sit there and watch, and she was like, "Nah, I'm fine." Like, we could have at least done separatists, maybe, but no.
yeah.
See, from a marketing point of view, if you have an ad and they mention, oh, this is the Star Wars episode, then all of a sudden people who might not always watch Lego Masters will go, oh, yeah, I want to watch the Star Wars episode.
At the same time, it can cause people to switch off too.
Well, yeah, that is true.
Well, that is a big part of it. Plus, you know, we're not as lucky as the States to have like R2-D2 and C-3PO walk out onto the set.
Yeah, no. Like, their whole thing is celebrities, which, you know, there's a part of me that's jealous. I want to meet Terry Crews. He's like my hero.
He's so awesome, man. Like, everything about him is energetic.
Yeah, love Terry Crews. He's like my number one person I want to meet before I cark it. So like, but like, you know, there was a lot. The US have got this very big like celebrity focus. Theirs is a little bit more of like kids, adults using Lego. It's a little bit more of an older demographic. Whereas what I think the Australian show does so well is that it is good for kids. It is good for parents and is good for the occasional adult who doesn't have kids. So.
Well, that's right, yeah. Well, that's right. I have children. It's called Lego blocks.
Yes, and Ruby the Whippet.
And Ruby the Whippet, that's correct. But I think it's hard too. Like, did you enjoy the US seasons as much as you've watched the Australian seasons in the past?
Look, I enjoyed the first season, but that's also because I was a huge fan of one of the contestants on that, Aaron Newman, who was...
He's a really nice dude.
He's a Lego designer now.
Yeah, like, he is. Like, I've met him a few times, like, Lego shows in passing, and he's always kind of like that, you know, left of center kind of dude that always keeps to himself.
Yeah.
But now he's such a big deal in the Lego community. I think people forget that it's much easier to be on the US one and be projected into Lego because you got 2 designers.
Yeah.
Where Australia, we're effectively in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. But people are still doing amazing things despite
Australia's pulling off some pretty cool builds. It'll be interesting to see. It depends when this episode airs, but it'll be interesting to see when, you know, what happens with season 4, considering the environment they were in, shifting premises from Melbourne to Sydney, you know, seeing what sort of environment it is and seeing if they can pull it off. Because if you watch the trailers, without giving away too much, because we know people who are on there, there's only one Melbourne person. The rest are like Sydney, right? Like, so it'll be interesting to see if it has such a wide reach with the community here in Melbourne, or it's just all Sydney people.
Well, it had to be Sydney people because, of course, circumstances dictated that it had to be that way because of COVID, obviously.
I hope they bring it back to filming in Melbourne, then we can go to the finale.
We technically still could go to the finale. They do have
but it's in
aeroplanes.
Sydney.
They are
But
working
it's in
now.
Sydney, man. Like,
Oh, come on now, Rick.
oh, yeah.
We'll have a discussion about this later. I'll win you over. It'll be fun.
So with the process of getting on Lego Masters, when you obviously applied, did you put in your history with what happened with your brain and stuff?
Yeah, so for people who don't know, so I have a very major medical condition. So when I was 19 and a half, I had a brain tumor. I was actually on holiday with my family. I was living in Geelong, but my family's from South Australia. That we did a caravan trip from Mount Gambier in South Australia all the way along the coast up to Brisbane to visit my aunt who was in hospital with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is basically a type of cancer. On the way up, I was playing Pokemon X and Y on my DS, and my vision went in my left eye. Just like started getting a little bit fuzzy. We didn't notice until we stopped over at like the Dubbo Zoo. I was looking through a camera, and my vision, like looking through there, everything was blurry, but the camera image came out crisp. And then I tried the other eye and realized something was up. My mum's like, "You're just playing too much Pokemon." I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah, that's the problem. They're like, "Hey, you're playing on that." You're like, "No."
Yeah. So 3 days going past, and all of a sudden I can't read anything out of my left eye at all. And then I started Googling on the internet, and of course it's like, go see somebody. And I tell my mum, we have to go see somebody. And she's like, no, it's fine. So I'm like thinking something's in my eye, constantly rubbing it. Give myself conjunctivitis, and my dad takes me to a doctor. Of course it clears up the moment that we get down to the doctor, but then I mention I still don't have the vision.
Yes.
And the doctor does a few tests, and he's like, I'm sending you to the optometrist across the road.
Right, yep.
Go to the optometrist, do a bunch of tests for about 40 minutes, and she's like, cool, your vision's stuffed, but there's nothing wrong with your actual eye. So it could be more serious. I'm going to send you to an ophthalmologist. Cue 2.5 hours of testing, like color, like I couldn't determine color from this far away, having my one eye covered.
Wow.
This is like 10 centimeters.
Yeah, I was like holding it here going, what is this color? And then I'm like, I think it's purple. And they're like, it's blue. I'm like, well, that's great. And the guy's doing the test, everything like that. And he's like, cool, I need you to go get an MRI scan because this is something serious. It seems like that there is something much further going on here. So cue my mother's quote unquote, I was wrong. Like I hold that against her. She's like, you'll never hear me say this again. I'm like, I hope not. So we go to get the MRI, waiting for a couple of days, trying to figure out what's going on. I end up getting a phone call on the phone to them, and they're like, it's a brain tumor. And so my mum's standing in front of me, and I'm like, this, and my mum's like, toilet. I'm like, tumor. And she's like, oh, I'm like, yeah. So still talking, getting a bunch of details over the phone. We go to a neurosurgeon, and he says, all right, taking a look at this, it's a very complicated one. What's actually happened is it's on the underside of your brain. It's attached to your pituitary gland, and it's hemorrhaged and pushed onto your optic nerve. That's why your vision's going. We're looking at the...
Sounds really
Oh, no, it gets
serious.
worse. It gets worse, right? We're looking at the MRI scans. We're like, this white thing here, that's the pituitary gland. He goes, no, that's the tumor. Like the whole thing was
How big was it?
About 2.5 by 3.2.
That's massive
big.
in your brain. That's like, you don't think it's big, but when it's in your brain, it's massive.
Big.
So pretty much I was like, it's a huge grape, pretty much. So I think I could be off with the measurement a little bit, but it was a pretty big one.
You're like 19 and a half, so this is like 2014, right?
It's exactly on the money. Yeah,
right,
2014.
Lucky Caroline does the research.
But yeah, so we go to this guy, and he's like, all right, you have 3 weeks. And we're like, okay,
3 weeks for what?
3 weeks until...
Oh, dude.
Yeah. So
Wow.
it was, you're going to have memory loss, personality loss, mental vegetation, paralysis, death, not necessarily in that order, 3 weeks.
That's a lot to carry as a 19-year-old man.
Yeah.
Did he say it matter-of-factly, or just did he kind of ease you into it?
He tried to. There's no real way you can ease
How
that.
can you not be a sledgehammer in a situation like that?
Yeah,
exactly.
true.
Oh, like doctors, unfortunately, have to do that most days anyway. But like, we have that. He tells us it's a good thing we caravanned up, because if I took a plane, the pressure cabin pressure would have killed me outright. I would be dead before I hit the
Oh my
ground.
God, dude. Wow.
So he sends off. He goes, here's my surgery plan. It involves going between the 2 halves of your brain at the front, through the front. 60% survival rate.
So you're still on holiday at this point?
It's not a holiday, no.
No,
it's not.
you're not at
Well,
home, right?
well,
You're
it's not
still
really a
traveling.
holiday.
I'm
Right?
far away.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
He says he's going to get in contact with another surgeon, see if he can try and figure it out. I called Danny at this point, who's in Mount Gambier staying with her mum, and having this conversation over the phone was horrendous. Danny had, at this point, massive travel anxiety. And then knowing, oh, cool, your boyfriend, who's all the way up there on holiday, is dying, pretty much. There's no way that you can drive me back in time. They're like, every single moment, every day is important to try and figure out what's going on. So I eventually get to a neurosurgeon called Scott Campbell. Now, Scott Campbell Do you remember that story from like the early 2000s where there was the twins that were born with their heads connected like vertically?
Oh, wow.
He was the guy who did the surgery for that.
That was the guy.
That was the guy who
Wow.
was my neurosurgeon.
That's the guy you want on your
That's
side,
the guy
right?
you need, right? Like,
He took a look at it and said, I think I can do this. I've only ever seen it in my entire life working as a doctor twice. I've never operated on it before. It's that rare of a situation. And so he went up through my nose and basically had to imagine like a water balloon, poke it with a hole and then sort of extract it out and then patch over the hole. And I had 4 surgeries. I had cerebrospinal fluid leaks. So I cannot begin to describe to you what an air pocket in your skull feels like, fizzling against your brain. But I would not wish it upon my worst enemy. It was hell. I would sit up in the hospital and be like, what's that bubbling noise? And then it's all of a sudden a violent head wump back, screaming for somebody to knock me out. I had 2 mental breakdowns in hospital. I was hospitalized for 6.5 weeks. I had 2 spinal taps, just those 10-centimeter needles into your spine. It was not a great ordeal at all, the whole thing. And I got discharged from the hospital twice and readmitted twice and then discharged the final time. But the whole time of all this was going on, Danny was there every moment of the way. She flew all the way up there. Had to sit there with my family, which was also a whole other kettle of fish. But like afterwards coming out of it, they go, cool, you're on these, you have to take this medication, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. It was about 6.5 months of recovery. I couldn't like run. I had issues walking just because of like, I was stuck in a bed so often I couldn't sit upright. Had no flesh on my bones or anything like that. Went to an endocrinologist. They figure out all these medications. They're like, cool, you got to take this medication every single day or you will die. So like that's still a thing to this day.
I can see you've got a bracelet on there as well.
Yeah, so the medical alert bracelet on there. But like every single morning for me, I wake up, take medication, wait 30 minutes, take medication, put on a gel, inject a needle, lunchtime medication, dinner time medication. Every day.
Wow.
that's a lot of, like, I struggle. Obviously, I'm on a lot of medication too, and I don't think anyone listening or watching at home, unless they've gone through something traumatic, understands the burden of medication.
Yeah, like it's something that might have happened in 2014, but it's an everyday thing. And when it came to Lego Masters, getting back to the original question, I didn't think they would actually go for it. They said, you know, if you've got a medical condition, put in, you know, talk to an endocrinologist, get them to sign off on it and everything like that. Talk to somebody. And so my endocrinologist signed off and he goes, yep, go for it. Just be wary of X, Y, Z. And the first challenge for us was rough because it was all of a sudden I was put in the most stressful situation of my life. Having to try and figure out a medication balance because one of the medications I take is in relation to stress. So then all of a sudden I need that medication and it was tough. And full credit to the guys who were running season 2 that they continued to give it a shot. There was a lovely girl called Zara. I love Zara. She would just walk around. She'd be like, you need a top up? I might give you a top up. I have to have it with food. So she'd give me a lolly snake and I'd just swing it. And then after we figured out an action plan for that, from that first challenge, we were good. I thought we were going home in the first elimination challenge, either by doing something bad or by medically being discharged from the show. But they still gave me a shot and we held on for as long as we could. And so with anybody who's like listening to this, I tell them, like, if you've got a condition, just give it a shot, please. Like, you'd be surprised how much that they are willing to try and accommodate for that sort of stuff. And, you know, they didn't actually talk about it on the show, which at the start of the show, I was a bit surprised by, but by the end of it, I can completely understand. Because my medical condition does not define who I am.
That's
I
right.
am not somebody who had a brain tumor and survived. I am much more than that. How I developed as a person from the start of the show and by the end of the show is very different. You ask any of the contestants on there, they were like, episode 1, Tim was a dick. Like,
No, we'd never believe that.
so like it was.
We'll ask Runa when she's on.
We will.
Yeah. I was one of those people who was so used to focusing on myself that when it came to the show and everything like that, it was good to be then a part of a team and talking to people and like Andrew and Damien, Trent, Josh, Jay, Starney, Jody, they were all really good people to talk to and sort of redefine that whole like, okay, it's not just about you. You've gone through that stuff, but what is there more to you? Like Jay was like, you know, it sucks that you went through all that sort of stuff. What else do you like? And you can't sit there and be like, I like Lego, because everybody in the room does. So then it was like, okay, what is there more to talk about? And I had basically went on this little path of self-discovery with my wife.
Yes.
And we then, I guess grew as people. It sounds so cliche, but it's what happened.
Yeah, but you got to remember too that, like Caroline and I, when I got sick, it's such a traumatic experience, and people always forget that. Like when you're suffering, like you and I have, people forget about the partner and how much weight, emotion, and everything they carry, because they're seeing someone they love, like nearly destroyed. Like it's a big thing, right? And you guys being on the show probably drew you guys closer, because you're learning more about yourselves in the daily life, where normally you're not usually spending that amount of time with each other, right?
Yeah. So this is a very interesting and fun segue. So you say, learning more about each other and growing closer. We spent a lot of time at the arcade down in Docklands. And Danny is very good at arcade machines, because she won a Nintendo Switch from a reaction
Seriously?
game twice.
Oh.
Nice.
Twice. So
Wow.
we went to down there to relax on like the third week of filming or something like that. I was playing Mario Kart. Danny said, I want to try the reaction game. And she walked back over with a Switch. I'm like, where'd you get that? She's like, I won it from the machine.
Wow, that's awesome.
So I was like, that's amazing. We went back up to the hotel room. We went to a nearby EB Games. We talked to them. They're like, is that one of ours? We're like, no, we won that from the arcade. They're like, no way. Bought some games, got very distracted whilst we were on the show. So when we came back for the semi-finals and we were coming back for those 2 weeks in January, we're like, we'll leave the Switch at home. And then first thing we did, went to the arcade, and Danny's like, I think the machine has lost enough times that I think I can win. And she plays it, and first shot, we're like, all right, cool, we've got another Switch.
We have a saying
You didn't
for
win.
that in our household, Rick.
Well,
winner,
winner, that's
chicken
right.
dinner.
Well, you didn't win the, obviously, 50k or 100k, whatever it is. At least you won 2 Switches.
Yay.
Well, Danny won 2 Switches.
Well, that's
She's
right,
very,
Danny. Danny won 2 Switches, right? So, yeah, well, you can't really say much. So how amazing.
Yeah, Danny is amazing at arcade games and all that sort of stuff. And a quick little backtrack to the conversation before as well. It's like with everything that happened to me, right? We actually got told that I couldn't have kids. They said
because
that is
of the
brain tumor.
Yeah.
Pituitary gland, 99.99% destroyed. 99.99% infertility, because they can't legally say infertile. And I remember having a conversation with Danny going like, are we still doing this? Like, we're engaged now. Are you still wanting to do this? And she's like, we can always adopt. The family isn't always by blood. And then the week we're going to put down the deposit for the wedding, positive pregnancy test.
Surprise.
So how many children do you have now?
We got 2 girls.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, considering everything you've been through, and, obviously the Lego Masters journey, and, brain operations, to come out with 2 kids on the other side, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And look, people are like, you have such a sad story. I'm like, it's not a sob story. Right? It sounds horrible to say it, but the brain tumor was the best thing that happened to me, because it gave me so much more self-worth. And I'm very grateful for the situation that I'm in. Right? It could be much worse. I did avoid having brain cancer. I met people in that ward who didn't get to walk out like I did. There was a huge amount of survivor's guilt. And, every single, I think it's 55% of the Australian population has a chronic illness, right? And people always think they're alone and isolated from everybody else, that nobody else can understand. And people have it much worse than I do. And I'm grateful for what I have. I'm very lucky that I still have our 2 girls. And that, I always wanted 2 girls growing up. I got 2 girls. It sounds so fake.
2 girls are the best.
Yeah,
though.
but look, at the end of the day, and I think, I get the same question as well, right? Because when you forget how to walk, it's not great.
No.
There's always someone else that's got it a lot harder. There's always someone else that's suffering. I lost one of my mates during the pandemic. It's a big thing, right? So to be coming out on the other side, I think it grows you as a person.
Yeah.
But we all have, you'd have a bad day, I have a bad day. Sometimes you feel sorry for yourself because you can.
The important thing is not to become insensitive to other people. The fact that you can keep going on every single time, knowing that, yes, this is hard, but I'm also not making it hard for other people. I'm making this as positive of a situation as I can be. That's the most important thing at the end of the day.
So with going back to season 2,
Yeah.
is there any goss you can reveal? Is there anyone you hated?
Absolutely not. There is nobody.
I got to get that stinger in, like,
No.
bang.
Really loved or enjoyed working with, but no, go straight
All
for
I
that.
can say is that Jay and Starney play a good round of D&D. We did play Dungeons and Dragons.
Love that,
Oh,
don't you?
Starney had never played Dungeons and Dragons before. Jay had listened to so many podcasts, never really got a chance. But
I need to learn. One of our employees is, like, massively
I've
into
done
it.
D&D for Jay and Starney. I've done D&D for Amy from season 3. So I'm got a huge lineup of people who want to do D&D, and I'm down. I use Lego for D&D.
I know Atlanta's big on the D&D.
Atlanta
as
is
well.
massive.
Had plenty of conversations with Atlanta
Yeah.
about D&D
Yeah.
as well. So I what they call a forever DM, always running the games, never playing it.
So looking back on your whole experience in the last couple of years, are you happy where you are now in your life's journey with everything that's went on in the past with you?
I mean, I could be 100 grand richer, but
Yeah, well,
no. In retrospect, like I do not regret any moment of it at all. Like the fact that Lego Masters gave us that chance, the fact that we can reach out, tell these stories, the fact that we can actually be, I guess, a bit blunt with our Lego hobby. Random people will talk to you and be like, "You were on Lego Masters." Like, yes, let me tell you about my hobby instead of sounding like a weirdo if I bring it up. So,
yeah, but Lego's more acceptable now. Like, it's one of the biggest products in the world.
Well,
so.
and I mean, of course, social media, the internet has brought everyone out of the closet, so to speak.
and their product lineup for the last couple of years has been insane. Like they've got the DeLorean coming out.
I know,
Like,
I'm
I'm
so
pumped. This is
excited.
going to air after the DeLorean.
Yeah.
So,
But-
but like, did you, before we wrap things up, speaking of DeLorean, did you get to review it for the blog, or did Andrew take over?
Andrew took.
Of course he did.
Yeah.
Of course he did.
Look, Back to the Future was admittedly a little bit before my time. I still appreciate Back to the Future. I love Back to the Future, but
It's a
you
classic.
kind of have to submit to the person who loves it that little bit more.
Well, Caroline's birthday a few years back, Dan was actually there, and so was
Dan
Andrew.
was there?
Yeah.
Where I did a surprise birthday screening of Back to the Future 2 at the cinema.
You did. Now, who is Andrew? We keep talking
Cheap
about Andrew.
jokes?
No, Brick Banter now.
Brick Banter now,
Brick
but
Banter. Yeah.
you'll see him in the future on a certain TV program.
Yes, non-specific.
Back to the Future.
But no,
It's not non-specific of what the program is.
Yeah, so Andrew runs Brick Banter alongside myself and Danny. We're working as this small little knit team. He's still the head honcho, but like we did a few little fun Lego reviews since the show, trying to understand what's next for us, where do we go? And Andrew was like, "Hey, I do Lego reviews for my blog. Do you want to give it a shot?" And he gave us this little $15 Frankenstein brickhead. He's like, "I don't know how to review it," and Danny and I just gave it a crack, and we're like, "Cool." It says Frankenstein on the box, but this is Frankenstein's monster. And we pointed out all these little things. He's like, that was really good. Let's do another one. And now we're the lead product reviewers for his
Yeah,
little
but
blog.
also too with hopefully he'll be on a later date. I think it needed a change because after a while the same thing gets repetitive, right? And bringing new blood in, you get different perspective on everything.
Oh,
That's exactly right.
New Blood, Danny's articles that she's got prepared now and the ones that she's done previously are great. She did a whole article on why Lego, like L-A-Y-G-O, that pronunciation is actually correct.
Yeah, there's actually
Riled some people up.
well, and also
You
too
listen
Lego
to the
is
Danes.
obviously a big Adelaide thing, and unfortunately the guy who owned Lego in Adelaide
Yes,
passed away, and that was pretty
Steve.
shocking. That was like Steve was a really nice guy. I really
few years ago
enjoyed
now.
Steve's company, and when he died I was incredibly sad because
I actually went to his funeral digitally because
Oh,
I
wow.
knew Steve. He called us honorary South Australians for the show because we were born. Danny and I are originally from South Australia, moved to Victoria.
yeah, well that's fair enough.
And
Like,
I visited his shop so many times, making this big giant dark blue sea serpent and just raiding parts from there. So, but Jody gave me the extension to the funeral digitally, and yeah,
that's
so
awesome.
I'm
He was such a nice dude. I knew he was sick. Like a select few of us knew he was quite sick because he wouldn't reveal it to everybody because you don't, right?
yeah,
And when he passed, I was like, oh shit.
yeah.
Like
Big
it
shock.
knocked the
It's
wing
like, ooh.
out of me because you're like, you knew he was sick, but you didn't expect it to happen. Like you know how you like,
Yeah.
you see him regularly at
How sick
Lego
are
shows and
they?
whatever.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
But yeah, that
we did organise a Lego Masters chat with him in the hospital, so I did get to have.
Oh,
a
that's
chat with
awesome,
him.
man.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
good.
Jody organised that, and then it's when we were having a good laugh with him. Like Danny and I were like, "Hi," and we're like, "Do you recognise us?" He's like, "Of course I do." I'm like, "Yes, yes."
Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Tim. It's been amazing to have you on. We appreciate it. I know it's
do.
been a long time happening. A few couple of years has been
Well,
bit
we've
crazy.
had some,
things and
obstructions
stuff.
in the way, but
Well, we'll obviously get Danny
Obstacles.
on. I'll reach out to you guys at a later date. We'll get Danny on, and then she can tell us her perspective and tell us if she still likes you. So we'll see how that goes.
That's true. I'll be very interested to hear that.
Well, I'm gonna put the link down below for Tim and Danny. They got a dual Instagram account, and I'll put a link down to Brick Banter 2, Andrew's blog. You'll see him on a certain TV show soon. But yeah, thank you for joining us, Tim. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.